Well, good Monday afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, I'm Steve Novotney. It is Steve Novotney Lives here on Lead News. Real busy show today. Let's see. Delegate Storch will be on with me at 4:30. Primary topic, forced polling. Delegate Fluharty will be on with me. Primary topic, the proposed repeal of our personal income tax. Scott Porter, a former trustee at Pultney Township, still very involved with county government. Scott's going to join me as well. But first and foremost, we're going to go ahead and hear from Assistant Superintendent of Ohio County Schools, Mr. Rick Jones. Rick, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well.
Doing all right?
How about yourself?
Oh,
hanging in there.
I'm happy about the weather, man. I mean, I'm just happy that it's a little warmer. You know, we went through, 2 weeks of frigid and then a bunch of snow. And then we went through the big melt. And I don't know about your house, but I had cow crews up on the roof.
Oh, uh-oh.
Well, we live in a 121-year-old house. It's not a 121-year-old roof, but it's just it's a bummer when those kind of things happen, and it's not major, thank goodness, because yeah, the roof's only 10 years old, but we've got 5 chimneys up there. This house was, 1900, and it's a double brownstone, and back in those days you had to have a fireplace to keep you warm.
Right.
I got mantles in every room.
1914, so I'm not far behind.
There you go. Yeah, and so my friends from Cow Crew went up, and it's very minor, and that'll happen here pretty soon, because apparently that snow and thaw caused a lot of problems for a lot of people in this area, Rick.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's just the nature. But in my tiny mind, Rick, we had a winter, so I'm thinking, okay. So are we going to get that white truck traffic, the gas and oil people back into the valley for that economic impact on our local businesses? I always hope for that to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
So how's Rick? How's everybody? How's the family? How's Kim? How's everyone?
We're doing good. Kim's had a couple rough weeks. As you probably know, her mom
Yes.
Suffered a stroke, and I think she's doing a little bit better, so she's been making a lot of trips back and forth to Pittsburgh.
Of course.
Everybody's thinking about her and praying for her family and everything, but it seems like things are going at least okay at this point.
Well, a lot of prayers, Rick Jones, a lot of prayers. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a praying person, and and she's not alone. A good friend, BJ Delbert, lost her mom. So there's been a lot of prayers there. And unfortunately, Betty Jean Knuckles passed away. And Betty Jean was my wife's best friend and our matchmaker. She introduced me and Michelle. So it's not been an easy couple of weeks.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So tell me about the preparations for getting back to normal, 5 days beginning in 1 week.
Yeah. So, there's a lot that goes with that when we've been basically about a year of doing, for the most part, just remote learning. So when we've been out and teachers have built their platforms for their kids and done a really good job at it, we chose to do that instead of just purchasing a canned program, which nothing wrong with those. We just wanted that personal connection.
Sure.
And our teachers have done an outstanding job with that. And then, we were ready at the semester to go and do one of the canned programs to get teachers away from doing the remote platform. And a little surprised. We had a whole lot of people from the community and a full board meeting, and a lot of people reaching out to us, teachers included, saying they did not want to do that because they wanted to maintain that connection with their students. So they wanted to maintain doing it. So we went with a 4-day plan. So 1 day for the teachers to plan all that. And we appreciated that they wanted that and the parents wanted it. So that's the way we went. And now here we are a couple months later. We're down in the green. Most everybody in our schools have been vaccinated, teachers and staff. And, the governor and the state board of ed said go back 5 days. That's their recommendation. So after a lot of debate, we decided, we have 80% of our kids at home on Wednesdays. It's time to try to go the last 8 to 10 weeks, 5 days.
Yeah.
As you said, what we're doing starting next week. So teachers, there's a sacrifice there. They're used to that full Wednesday, and now we're only going to do a delay on that day. So, it's going to be hard for them, and we appreciate that and understand that. And they've sacrificed a lot throughout all of this, and we're hoping we can get through this last part with another sacrifice on their part, and we can't thank them enough for that.
Well, we're on our way. The CDC just came out and said, hey, grandparents, if you're double vaxxed, you can go visit family and you don't have to wear a mask.
Yeah.
So that's progress. Yeah, that's progress in this whole thing. But, Rick, it was just a few days, and I know other media outlets have talked to y'all about this, but it was just a few days after the superintendent said 5 days a week's impossible. And then a few days later, 5 days a week it is. Go ahead and tell us about those conversations, those scenarios.
Yeah, well, that's something that people don't really understand. Like, we do, in order to make changes, we have to be together and have a lot of conversation and planning. And on that Monday of the board meeting, we had not had any of that conversation yet. So at that time, we thought, man, this is going to be really hard to pull off, to reduce the amount of time that teachers are going to have, because everybody still wants their connection with their teacher. Is there a way to do this? And then that was on Monday. And then Tuesday, we sat down and said, okay, now if we wanted to go 5 days, can we make it work? How do we make it work? And we went through about every scenario that we could to try to make it work. And it took us 2 or 3 days to come up with what we ended up thinking was the best scenario. We went and talked with teachers and principals, and came up with the 2-hour delay on Wednesday is the best option. It's not perfect for teachers, that's for sure, but it was our best option, because like one of the other ones was, do we do an hour delay every day? So that's 5 hours a week extra for teachers. And we thought that's too disruptive. And teachers said the same thing, especially elementary. We can't ask parents now to adjust again, and they're used to going to work and they've made their arrangements. Now we're going to have them do an hour delay again. That would upset most of our elementary teachers or parents for sure. And then we thought about an hourly dismissal every day, and that came with its own problems. So we went and talked to a couple teachers who do an outstanding job on our platform, and they thought that they'd be fine with a 2-hour delay. And then we're going to do some supplemental outside on their own pay for about 3 hours a week to help make up for some of the time lost. And we're able to use some CARES Act money for that. So they at least make a little bit more money. And yes, it's a little bit of time away, at home, but, if they put in an extra hour every morning or something like that for the week, we can compensate them for that. And that's what we're going to try to do. So we'll see here in a week. I think it'll be fine. But like everything else, there'll be a lot of adjusting and pivoting. Now our big issue is, here we are. It's that most places are not doing 6 feet anymore for contact tracing. West Virginia still is. I'm hoping that the governor changes that, and our state, the CDC, changes it, because with kids at the high school, still, here we are, we're asking them to come to school, and they get to play their sport finally. And if they sit next to a kid gets COVID positive, they have to sit out for a week. And right now you have 3 or 4 basketball games and wrestling matches and swim meets a week. So if you sit out a week or 10 days, you could miss, a fourth, a third of your season.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of kids are starting to choose to go remote during their sports, which it's hard to argue with. But the more kids that do that, it's kind of contagious. If you're used to 25 kids in your class and now it's 15, then they say, oh, Mom, everybody's going remote. And then it's 10. And then you come and go, why am I going? There's only 10 people in my class. And then it just kind of snowballs. But we're hoping that we can do it in short spurts with athletes and then they come back as soon as their season's over. Or we're trying to, with our cheerleaders, for example, they have their state championship in 2 weeks. We administratively told them, everybody go remote for those next 2 weeks so you don't risk having to be quarantined and moving your state meet.
I got you.
Losing your state championship hopes. So we'll see how all that plays out as well.
Now, Rick, it was announced that approximately 19% of the student population was still on remote. With that development, how high has that percentage increased since that's the new way to go about it, so you're not quarantined?
Well, it's just starting this week, so we don't have those numbers.
Gotcha.
So, you talk about 20 basketball players, 20 girls basketball players, 20 wrestlers, 30, 40 swimmers, however many, and, you just add those up, another 50, 70, 80 kids, maybe, if they all do it. And I don't think all of them will do it, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Probably the varsity for sure, JV and stuff, maybe not, but we'll have to see how it goes. But yeah, we're right around that 20% of remote, and hoping that as cases continue to decline, that some of those start coming back into the school and we finish up this spring in a good way.
Assistant Superintendent Rick Jones here. Rick, of course, with Ohio County Schools. Rick, what have been the biggest challenges? When you guys are sitting down going, okay, let's wrap our heads around 5 days. Okay, we have a 2-hour delay on Wednesdays for the virtual development. But what else? What else is really challenging getting back to that new normal in our schools?
To me, the biggest challenge is trying to find that place where you please and satisfy as many people as you can. Everybody has a different opinion on, should we be 5 days? Should we be 2 days? Should we be everybody? It's just, we're just a microcosm of the world. Everybody has their own opinion. So we try to listen. And it seems like when we listen, then the other group that doesn't believe it starts voicing their concerns. And we just try to find that middle ground of what we believe, and also listen to the community and try to find that place where we satisfy everybody with. This is what we thought was that place was everybody still gets to keep their own teacher, K through 12, pre-K through 12. We get to go 5 days. And if you want to be remote, you can be remote. So we've kind of satisfied. It's kind of like choose your education here for the rest of this year. And again, the people, it's harder work for the teachers, and we appreciate them and everything they're doing. So that's been the biggest challenge, just trying to navigate what our community wants.
Sure.
It's just so split.
Rick, my biggest concern about all this, and it's not, I know I'm a sports guy, you're a sports guy, but number one isn't sports. I want them to compete. I'm happy that West Virginia finally came up, but my number one concern is just how far behind these kids are. Rick, has there ever been a discussion? Has there ever been a discussion in Ohio County Schools to hold everybody back a year?
We have not had that discussion, no.
Does that surprise you that that's not come into play?
I think that would be probably more of a state push. I don't think that'll happen because of the age of kids, and how do you hold a kid? How do you make a kid come back when they're graduating? And
sure,
I don't know. That'd be a lot of issues with that.
How far behind do you think they are, Rick? A semester. I know that, I've spoken to Superintendent Dr. Miller, and there's a program that's been developed for this summer. We can call it the catch-up program, but and I'm hoping that we have a great attendance. Buses will be running, so transportation can't be an excuse. I just, I'm not old enough. I have not forgotten the pace and what I was taught in high school, so on and so forth. And remote learning for a month, cool. I get to stay home. I can wear
I know.
PJs to my classes. But for this long, I don't know, man. I truly don't know.
And I don't either. And I think we'll see some things this spring when we do some testing. And I know just at home, my son has had a lot to do on those platforms, and it's a lot of independent, self-paced type stuff, which I guess there's a little advantage to that is you're going to have a lot of that in college. So there's no one in front of you pushing you.
Sure, right.
Like you would in a classroom. So you're home. Like, am I going to actually get on there and do this? And building that for the first time ever, this yesterday, my son popped open his laptop and said, I have some work to do before I go to work. He works just a little bit at the Highland Sports Complex. And I looked over, I almost fell down. I couldn't believe, without any prompting, he opened it up and got it done. I could not believe it. He's maybe developed a little bit of, I got to get this stuff done, because he's so used to online, and it's got to get done, and it'll add up if you don't, as opposed to somebody in front of a classroom making you get it out and do it. They're behind, I'm sure. I don't know if it's as bad as everybody thinks, because there still was education. It just wasn't the ideal, optimal situation. So we're just, surviving a pandemic, and we'll see. I think most kids pick up things pretty quickly, and I'm hoping they will, but we'll see.
Yeah, 5 days a week, Rick. I mean, at this point, is it going to feel a little weird?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt. It'll feel weird. Yeah, that Wednesday has become, especially for students, that's really for a kid that's, needs to sleep, and it's nice to go Monday, Tuesday, know that you have Wednesday to get a little extra sleep, get yourself back in order, go 2 more days, and then have the weekend. It's kind of a nice gig for the kids.
Yeah.
And now that having to go 5 straight days again, getting up, especially at the park, super early to get up there, it's going to be a little adjustment for them.
Yeah, I think so. Rick Jones, thank you, my friend. I do appreciate your time always. And, I'll be calling you again soon.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Steve. Okay.
All right. Appreciate it. Rick Jones, ladies and gentlemen, the Assistant Superintendent of Ohio County Schools. Scott Porter, a former Pultney Township trustee, and he's a former employee of here and there. And Scott, you put a post up today that I had a lot of fun with, and I'll tell you why I had fun with it. You made me think of my childhood.
Oh, I know which one that was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, you were looking over the bridge. You were, a little kid on an adventure and everything. And, I just started thinking multiple things, to be honest with you. I'm like, man, did we take some adventures? That whole Stand By Me movie, do you remember that?
Yeah. Yes.
Those kind of adventures were very real when you and I were growing up.
Oh, man, I grew up on 51 acres. And, so we had my 2 brothers, some neighbors, quarter-mile away on each side.
You're going to turn this way, my friend.
Gotta turn the mic,
bring that mic this way.
I apologize for that.
That's all right.
Yeah, so, growing up, I mean, we used our imagination, and I've said this before, and I think some kids today don't get to do that.
No.
They're caught up in what they're doing now. The generation now does. And I think, I'd never change a thing for what I went through to get that.
No, me either. I mean, you grew up on all that acreage. That's a lot of woods. I grew up, beneath a hillside, a hilltop. And that was a playground. That was many playgrounds. And, of course, in both communities, we had the creek or the crick.
Absolutely. It's always the creek until my mother calls.
Right.
Or it's always the crick until my mother calls. But, yeah, I mean, the hours that we spent just out looking at things, we didn't know what we was doing. We would walk, through the woods, and you'd come across the remains of an old house or an old barn or something, and so you just went in and did it. nowadays you go to jail if you do that stuff.
That's right. Oh, no, and I'm sure you've heard. I grew up where Stratford Springs used to be.
Right.
Like
right.
the actual bottling plant.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yes.
And where all the springs were and all that. And, there used to be that hotel up on the hill. Well, that was gone by then. But what wasn't gone was the old bottling plant. Okay? And it was, I'm trying to remember the name of the road. Somebody can send it to me. Oh, Taylor says, "Hi, Dad." So there you go. You got Taylor going for you.
Yeah, she's always looking for free plug.
There you go.
Hi, Taylor.
Taylor Joe and the Copper Creek Band.
I'm sure we'll touch on that today.
Of course. But no, seriously, we went in there and you see people post like, "Hey, look what I found at an antique store," all the Stratford Springs bottles.
Right, right.
Well, we've had those for years.
You had them for years and you probably shot them with BB guns and everything else. Okay, we won't talk about that.
You know what's funny is if you didn't get a dime or a quarter taking them back to the store, they usually ended up that way.
Target practice. I had we had an old outhouse at our property, and it was stored all these boxes in there, and we come across it and found out there were all these nice colored insulators from the telephone wires and electric wires. And there were boxes of these.
Yeah.
So we used them.
Ah.
And then, 25 years later, I look on eBay and I say, "Holy cow, I could have made a fortune."
I know. Listen, they put a sewer under Edgewood Street when I was a kid. We rode our bikes through it. That's, you didn't know.
You don't know, yeah.
And the thing is you didn't tell Mom and Dad.
Well, no.
Because that was still the era when they were like, here's $2. Buy your lunch at Burger Chef. I don't want to see you until 6:15.
Before the street lights come on, be home.
Well, that was after dinner. 6:15 was when Dad wanted to eat back then. And so we were always there at 6:15. And then as soon as dinner was done, we vanished.
Back
Go.
out again.
Get out.
But, like I said, and it's a shame kids can't do some of the stuff we did.
There's so many trust issues with society anymore.
Yeah,
we had bad people back then, but it just seems like.
Well, I think it's just so much publicized now, and it becomes copycat. But it's just growing. I don't know what it was, but
right.
We just didn't have those issues. The biggest issues we had was, hey, don't go to that guy's house. He's always drinking, fighting or whatever's going on. But,
yeah, he's always yelling at somebody.
Yeah, he's yelling at somebody.
Don't go in that yard.
You don't like kids. My grandmother, you could cross from the alley through her yard to the street, but my goodness, you better close that gate.
Right.
If you didn't close the gate, she was coming after you.
Right, right. Speaking of Taylor and the family, how's everybody? Everybody good?
Everybody's good. Oldest daughter.
Did you get vaccinated yet?
I have not. My mother-in-law just got her appointment for next week.
Okay.
Or no, actually this week, this Thursday. So I'm not at the age level yet. So.
Yeah, I'm still waiting too.
And I just been everything's been going well. My oldest daughter and her husband, they switched up a little bit during the pandemic because they couldn't do the bowling and all the other things. So they are doing Taekwondo. My daughter's up to the yellow belt now, and she loves it, which is great. And of course, Taylor Jo, my youngest one, she's doing nursing at the East High Regional Hospital.
Yeah, good for her.
At the county prison, and she still works at ICR part time, and the band's playing. Yeah, she's young, Steve. She can do that kind of thing. So.
That's very, 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 very true.
Yeah.
Let's see. We've got a couple minutes. You retired from Pultney Township as a trustee.
Correct.
You want to explain that before we take the break?
I was getting into a employment situation where it probably would have been a conflict of interest, and I didn't want to put the township at that in that predicament. And also, I wouldn't be able to make most of the meetings like I always did. And I was just concerned that I wouldn't be able to give the constituents the proper time that they elected me for. So we decided, I talked with the other trustees, and I went out right at the end of the year, and that became a whole year the next guy would have before he has to run to make sure that's what he wants to do, he or she. They did appoint John LaRoche to that position. John's a good guy. I don't know him that well, but I know of him. But everything that I know from other folks in the government agencies, he's a good guy. He'll do well for them.
Okay.
But and me, but I just felt that I needed to get out and give them the proper time, and I just didn't want to get into conflict of interest issues.
I got you.
But I still work with them, so
I'm sure you do.
We'll talk about that after I don't know how far we get to the break.
We're gonna take it as soon as you quit talking.
All right, then here we go to the break, sir.
All right, Scott Porter, ladies and gentlemen, again, a retired Pultney Township trustee, but also a former employer of a couple of, one village and one municipality. We'll talk about the big challenges that a lot of the communities along the Ohio River on the Ohio side are having right now. Scott Porter is here. Of course, I'm Steve Novotney. It is Steve Novotney Lives here on Lead News. Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Many thanks to Rick Jones, the Assistant Superintendent of Ohio County Schools, coming on in. A little bit of news that I didn't ask Rick about is Ohio County Sheriff Tom Howard has come out and said that the prevention resource officers in Ohio County Schools have been removed from the budget because of the difference between what a resource officer costs the city and the county and this and that. But we didn't really have all that much time, Rick, on a very limited schedule. I hope that the PROs can get back into the schools because, I'm not the guy that's going to go ahead and say, hey, nothing's happened. Let's just go ahead and take those folks out. I'm a big believer in the PRO program, so I'm hoping something can be worked out in the future. My guest next hour, Shawn Fluharty leads off, of course, Delegate, 3rd District, and then at 4:35-ish, Delegate Erikka Storch returns to Steve Novotney Lives. Erikka has been on with us each week of the show, just giving us an update. She is a member of the supermajority, the Republican Party, while Shawn is one of 24 Democratic delegates in the House of Delegates. So 2 very interesting perspectives. Those 2 continue to work together to represent the constituents of the 3rd District. And, we'll talk forced polling. We're going to talk about the repeal of the personal income tax, all of that stuff. And I'm telling you right now, and Scott Porter is here, Scott from East Ohio, from Neps, Ohio, the Metropolis. The Metropolis of Neps, Ohio. Get a kick out of that, Scott. I just think it's a bad plan. I'll talk more with the lawmakers about why, but it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But on the good side of the news, Scott, the numbers keep going down.
Yeah, the numbers are going down. That's for sure. So,
that you heard me talk to Rick Jones 5 days a week. That's not been the case in a year.
No, it's I have nephews in the Bellaire school district, and they went back last week 4 days, and I think they're starting this week 5. But it's I've watched their demeanors a little off from just the normal, and I think it's just because of the lack of socialization with all their friends. But they have kept up, and our teachers, from what I'm seeing, are really going above and beyond to make this distance learning work. So that's it's tough, and it's I know that some of the kids are. I saw a few look. It seemed to me they're withdrawing, but it seems now that they were back in school. I think it was either last week or the week before for 4 days, and then coming into 5 days. We're seeing more of the neighborhood moving about. So just hope they all can get back and everybody stays healthy. And the teachers, they've got I think they've got a hill to climb. Part of your conversation with the superintendent was about falling behind.
Right.
And the ones that are self-motivated or the ones that have support that can help them keep up is one thing. But I know that, a couple of my nephews, what they're working on, I would have no idea how to help them because I was taught a different way.
Oh yeah, you're bringing in the Common Core math thing.
And I'm not, that's everybody's opinion on that, what's good, what's bad, but I could get the same answer, but I couldn't do it the way they wanted to do it.
Exactly.
So I think that's the rough part with some of the students falling behind. I really do because, if they hadn't grasped the formulas or whatever before, without the teacher's help, I think they struggled a little bit. I saw in the math and the science sides.
And those are the kids that actually showed up.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I get sheriff reports from Marshall County, Ohio County, Belmont County, and I can't tell you how many times I've read on those reports a welfare check because a counselor, a counselor, a teacher, or a principal has said, hey, we've had no contact with this child. Can you go make sure everything's okay?
Right.
Hundreds, quite frankly, since this whole thing began. And, I'm worried about the student who has interacted, who's done the work. Like Rick Jones said, his son's like, well, I got a little bit of work to do.
Right.
I'm worried about those kids because of the socialization, the isolation, and because I don't know at what pace they were able to work compared to the pace they would have worked when in person.
When in-person training.
Yeah.
Teaching.
But I am very concerned about the kids whose parents didn't say, hey, did you do your homework? Did you do your work? Because unfortunately, we don't like to admit it, especially here in Ohio County. I'm just going to tell you, the people in Ohio County the truth. Okay? You're not going to like it. But we have a lot of parents who just don't want to be parents.
Yeah, I've seen that also.
I mean, I know that's the case everywhere in every nook and cranny, but when we talk about poverty, when we talk about free and assisted lunches and stuff like that, it seems to me as if the people in Ohio County don't want to believe that that's reality here, and it is.
It is, and I would hope that this, if nothing else is gained out of this pandemic situation with the education, is we finally realize how important the teachers are and the staff at these school districts are to these children. Because, unfortunately, sometimes they are mom and dad to the students.
Yeah. Not sometimes.
All the time.
Let's face it, Scott. The role of the teacher, of the educator, has grown a great deal since the last day you walked out of Bellaire High and the last day I walked out of Blensley.
Absolutely. I just don't. I used to, people would comment on the Facebook post about something going on at the school, and it was negative. Oh, the teachers, they don't do anything, blah, blah, blah. And now I truly believe, I know personally some of the parents I've talked to said, I don't know how these teachers do it.
Yeah.
So hopefully if we can get anything out of this mess is maybe to get more support to the education side, knowing that should something like this happen again, we've got to be on the same page, parents, students, teachers. And, I've talked to teachers and they're frustrated. They want to see little Johnny and Sally that they, kind of kept an eye on because they knew maybe there were problems somewhere else. It's just, I hope that, we can finally appreciate what teachers and the staff at these school districts are doing for our children.
I hope so. Another topic we'll talk with delegates Fluharty and Storch is, along the same lines. The teachers have worked extra, a lot extra to try and care for these kids. And so what do we do in West Virginia? What do the Republican majorities do? It was already illegal, but now we have a new law saying that a strike is illegal.
Yeah.
That's respect for you.
That's, it's giving them what.
I know.
Never mind.
I know. Let's get to Belmont County. You made a post, I think about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. A laydown yard had been established, and you had stated in a post on Facebook that here's the bad part. It's going to alter the flow of water if we have flooding, and it's going to make things a lot worse for residents and their properties.
Correct.
Tell us about that situation.
I lost a home in 2004. We watched the flooding, and we've been battling.
Ripped off its foundation, ladies and gentlemen. I was there.
It's no longer there. It's a green space. But, there's a group, an area on the south side of Neffs that sit a little lower. And we asked if we could berm the bank of the creek up to help keep the water coming over. We were told, no, you cannot alter the flow of water. So
it's true.
And it is. And their floodplains are there for a
Scott,
reason.
we're not allowed to lift a rock for a crawdad.
Yeah, I know, but
we're a Helgamite.
And it's frustrating because the development as we progress in the county creates different runoff situations. So what we're experiencing in Neffs, this area that never used to really flood a lot. Water would come up, water would go down when a river backed up. But now we're getting from the top of the hill down because the natural runoffs areas have changed due to development. So the other day I would go up there and this lot that is right beside the creek and the main road, it is there because the 100-and-something-year-old building got washed out in, I think it was 18 from a flood.
Okay.
And a couple of days later, and it's not a flood plain, it's a floodway. So what that means is it's, a little bit out of the 100% or 100-year range. However, the past 16 years, 17 years, that runoff area has changed. It should be in a flood zone, and it was just never changed. It was never petitioned to be changed. So we lost a 100-and-something-year-old building because of the flood. The county came in, I believe, used federal funds to tear this building down, make it a green space.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, last week they start piling gravel up. They've got matting for equipment to cross roads. And they bermed it up about 4 feet high all along there to protect themselves. Now, this is not the county. This is a contractor, but somebody had given him permission to do that. And so when I questioned it, I haven't got an answer. So, that's concerning to me because should the water come back up, and it's usually anywhere from, I think the past 2 years has been June and July, we usually get the high waters there. If that water comes up now, it's going to force that water across to the other side of the creek where the residents with homes, there's 20-some homes over there, were not allowed to berm up to protect their homes.
Yeah.
But they've now bermed up to protect piles of gravel. We've got 2 or 3 fuel tanks sitting there that are not anchored down. One of the things FEMA came through when we got flooded and we wanted to rebuild was anything movable should be anchored down.
Right.
And it's not. So, and this is one of the reasons why, I used to get so upset and argue and fight with everybody and point fingers. It's time that we just get into the 21st century and start following the policies that you're laying down for everybody else, but not when it doesn't suit what you need.
Right.
So those are some of the things I'm still working on. Fortunately, we're starting to get the attention that there are stormwater policies that need to be put in place in Belmont County. So that's what we're working. That's one of the things I'm working on with the powers to be, the engineers, the FEMA folks, the EMA folks. I bug them constantly for information. So, but I've got a good friend up in Summit County, Brian Pruney, who runs the Summit County Soil and Water Conservation, and he's helping me out a lot with guidelines to present to the county so that we can get policy written that covers everyone.
You would think, Scott Porter, that after the massive destruction of September 2004 and the tragedy that took place along Ouija Creek near Shadyside.
Yeah.
Sometimes when these things are permitted, it allows me to think that Boy, we have short memories.
Our attention span's good for about a week, and then we're on to something else, it seems like.
You know, if we don't have a concentration, not just in Belmont County, but this entire valley on debris along waterways,
yes,
then we have forgotten the lesson learned by more than 20 deaths.
Yes.
Along Ouija Creek, because, folks, if you don't know what I'm speaking of, or maybe you have a little bit of memory, Scott and I have talked about it. I've talked about it with other folks. You know, there was a lot of rain. There's no denying that.
Right.
Just a ton of rain very quickly. Like on September 17, 2004, we got 10 inches of rain in 10 hours, and it decimated this valley.
It did.
Everything was underwater. Kids were walking up hills to get on school buses along the interstate. The porterhouse was knocked off its foundation completely, and so many others. I mean, but it just seems, and the debris that was along Ouija Creek, it dammed it up.
Yes.
But the one thing about water, especially that much water, is it's got Superman strength, and it's going to go where it wants to go, and it did.
Yes, it did.
It destroyed homes. It destroyed lives. It took lives.
It changed Ouija Creek and the residents' demeanor, of course. No one's, I still, when I drive up through there, I still remember, well, that used to be here, that used to be there. We don't learn. We have not comprehended that, okay, it wasn't a once-in-a-lifetime thing. This could happen again because we can't control the weather.
No.
And no matter what you do with stormwater policy, you may never solve every issue. But if you look at what is synonymous in every flood, is usually the debris and everything that backs up.
Yeah. We go on cruises every once in a while just to get out in the county, especially during the pandemic.
Right.
And every once in a while, I'll be traveling, Michelle or Michael or somebody will be driving, and I'll look over and I'll just see a yard. And I can hear the conversation, oh, no, Junior, just put that over there.
Yep. We'll save that till later.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and pick out for parts. And meanwhile, it's just not a very good situation, especially along our waterways. And I know that we're talking about extreme situations with a whole lot of rain, folks, but it's always, always, always something to think about, because guess what? And then we're going to move on to a different topic. Guess what? On September 17, 2004, nobody told us that we were getting 10 inches. Nobody told us Hurricane Ivan was going to settle above our heads and rain on us hard. I'm bald. I didn't have a hat on. It hurt. Rain on us that hard, that consistently for 10 straight hours.
Right.
Not a meteorologist in this world told us that was going to happen.
They had installed flood warning systems on Willow Grove Road for that situation. So as the water was coming up, we could, they would notify the people with the EMA. They'd notify. And that didn't work because nobody maintained the darn thing once they put it in.
Right.
It was I truly believe it was damaged by high waters and it never got replaced or returned. But, Steve, the whole issue is awareness. You have to be aware. And, unfortunately, you got to keep reminding folks, because there's some folks, now that live on Ouija that weren't born when it happened, and maybe they don't even know what happened. And it's not just Ouija. You've got every little stream can overflow at any point in time with excessive rain. So we've got to be a little smarter than what we're doing.
Now, as far as the communities, Martins Ferry municipality, you were service director. You wore many hats in the village of Bellaire. What are those biggest challenges right now, Scott? We have about 5 minutes, but what are the particular challenges? Not just those two areas.
No,
but St. Clairsville, Shadyside,
right.
all other areas. It's East Ohio. There are differences, even though a river only separates us, ladies and gentlemen. There are differences with funding mechanisms, education, so on and so forth. What are the biggest challenges in East Ohio?
I mean, to this day, infrastructure is still number one because the latest news, Steubenville had a major water break.
Yep.
St. Clair's was having some water issues. Bridgeport had to tie in with Martins Ferry because they had water issues. Bellaire is constantly battling their water issues. And it all comes down to we have an 80 and 90-year-old plant or 80 and 90-year-old pipes in the ground that we don't, we keep patching things, folks. And we never, the East Coast was industrialized, and we moved west all the way across the United States, building the whole United States. We sent steel, we sent glass, we sent whatever.
We built America.
We built America, and guess what? We forgot to rebuild ourselves. We never retooled ourselves, and so we died. Steel died, coal's having a hard time. Gas and oil is what it is. But we didn't take care of our infrastructure. As we lost residents, of course, the revenue went down. That's the number one problem, I believe, in most of these.
Okay, here's mine, Scott. Okay, I was thinking about this when I was prepping. The three biggest problems, not just in East Ohio, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, it's a problem here in Wheeling. It's a problem down in Marshall County, so on and so forth. Number one, funding.
Yes.
Okay, in East Ohio, Governor Kasich took 20%, another 20%, and DeWine's not giving much of it back.
No.
In West Virginia, it's always a struggle, and we'll talk about this repeal of the personal property tax and what it'll do to this panhandle here shortly. Number two, infrastructure. You already cited the infrastructure. Yeah, sure, great. I-70's getting done because somebody had to crawl around under bridges for 4 months and embarrass the governor to finally get it moving. I can't remember who that was.
I don't know, but I recall seeing those pictures. Yeah, I think that guy's familiar to me.
Yeah, I had to do that. Okay, so, but what about I-470? What about those bridges? I can't get a call back from DOH when I ask that question.
In the village of Bellaire and in the city of Martins Ferry and all the other, in the township, we have bridges. Our bridges are inspected annually. And we get a report. Each entity gets a report. In the township, the county owns anything over 20 feet. And in Bellaire, there's a couple bridges that were put in as during the Route 7 interchange being put through.
Yeah.
And those bridges fall under state inspection. But, they came right back and would tell the local entities what's wrong or if it needs worked on. And so they were inspected constantly. And talking with you, I realized they didn't do quite as many inspections ever on this side of the river.
Right. No, they didn't. And number three, as we're very close to out of time, number three, the kicked cans by government.
Oh, yeah. That can's wore out. They had to get a new can because they keep kicking it so much.
They grew up playing kick the can.
Yep.
And they just did it as elected officials. And we're still trying to catch up. I mean, Wheeling had to build a $35 million water plant.
Yeah. Townships are one of the better organized or run government organization, I believe, because there's only 3 people on the board.
Right.
But our biggest struggle was funding, and we would go out and our roads were falling apart, and we've been, we set a plan, the other two and I, and we passed a good levy that was tough to pass, but we met with people, we discussed it with people. The problem comes down to, it takes us 5 years to get to an area to get it fixed. And as soon as you fix the darn thing, next comes somebody, the water company, the sewer company, to cut up the road.
Yeah.
So we stopped all new projects until we could coordinate with everybody. And I think that's a big problem with these government agencies. There's so much paperwork. Nobody wants to coordinate with each other.
Right. We're out of time, my man.
Not a problem.
But thank you very much for coming to the oldest studio in the history of Wheeling.
Hey, brother, I love this place, man. We just need, I think we need to come back.
Oh, you'll be back, my man. You will be back. Scott Porter, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Appreciate it very, very much, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we'll go ahead and take our top of the hour break. Shawn Fluharty, a native of Marshall County, now representative of District 3 here in Ohio County in the House of Delegates of West Virginia, and he is Minority Whip. We'll talk to Shawn here in just a moment. I'm Steve Novotney. It is Steve Novotney Lives on Lead News. Welcome back for hour number 2, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, I'm Steve Novotney here on Steve Novotney Lives. It's all about lead news, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go to Delegate Shawn Fluharty. Make sure we can hear him okay out of the state capital of Charleston. Shawn, how are you, my friend?
Steve, how's it going?
Oh, it's definitely going, and I'm glad, Shawn, when I texted you the other day that I got your attention.
It's hard to get the attention during these 60 days, but you're able to get it.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty important, you know. I mean, you gave me a hint on, how to make sure to get your attention during, a session and everything. So, by golly, that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, it's crazy down here this session for sure. I mean, it's different in how we operate from committee meetings to our day-to-day schedule. Everything's kind of been in flux, and COVID controls everything. At least it has this legislative session.
Well, and the precautions and everything. I've seen many of the steps that have had to be made to keep everybody safe, and I mean, knock on wood, hopefully everybody's doing well, right? We've not had a reported positive, have we?
No, not that I know of. Certainly, I'm sure they would have made us aware of that if that happened. So I think all the precautions have worked as far as keeping people socially distanced. And, most legislators are doing a good job of wearing their masks. There's only a select few who, want to go against the grain and put themselves first before the staff and fellow legislators. But surprisingly, I think it's a welcoming sight to see that most people are following the guidelines.
Well, there you go. Shawn Fluharty, ladies and gentlemen, Delegate 3rd District here in Ohio County. Week number 4, Shawn. You're one of 24 in the House of Delegates. You're battling, you're floor speeching, you're trying to make sense of it. But, Shawn, you had to know that with supermajorities on the other side of the aisle, well, the people's will is the GOP way.
It certainly is, and I'll tell you the biggest issue that we've had. Obviously, Steve, the numbers are what they are, as you referenced. The biggest difference, committee meetings, we have 6 Democrats in committee. That's not a whole lot.
No, that's
not. A
not.
whole lot that you could do, to change things up. And why that's important is a lot of times when you have numbers that are closer together, both sides will work together more often so they can get something out, right? I might see an issue with a piece of legislation. On the flip side, the majority might see an issue with a piece of legislation. You kind of work together. What's the best way we can get this worked out so that we can get it out of committee, right? Because you might be able to get a few to come over on the other side and vice versa on certain pieces of legislation. Well, now it's null and void in committee because it's coming out no matter what, Steve. Those votes are there. There's not enough votes to slow anything down. The biggest issue I have, the biggest complaint, the numbers are what they are, Steve. That's fine. But the single referencing of bills is a real issue that all West Virginians should be concerned about. And here's what I mean by that. When a piece of legislation gets introduced, it goes to assigned to committees. Typically, it goes to at least 2 committees. So we've had some big pieces of legislation, Steve. We had a whole revamping of licenses in West Virginia, a whole revamping of alcohol sales in West Virginia, some major pieces of legislation that are 90-page bills that are coming through. Well, when it goes to one committee, only about 24, 25 people see it. When it goes to 2 committees, well, you get at least half the body get to see it before it gets to the floor. So any errors, any issues, anything that might jump up that some people might miss, once you get 2 committees through it, it tends to get vetted pretty swiftly and pretty well.
Right.
Not now. Everything's single reference. Everything is single reference. These big bills coming through. Just today we had the 50-50 bill that deals with family law in West Virginia. And it's an issue that a lot of people are concerned about. These bills deserve proper vetting so that then you're not seeing it for the first time from many legislators on the House floor. And then they have questions. And then our floor sessions become extra long because more questions are being asked because a lot of legislators are just now seeing the legislation. So it's just not good government. It's not transparent. It's just not good functioning government. I'd be saying the same thing if we flipped it around.
Yeah, I was about to ask that question. I was just about to ask that question. You know me well.
Yeah, it's just And you know me well, Steve. I call it like I see it.
Yeah.
I get yelled at from all angles all the time.
Mhm.
Republicans, Democrats, Independents. I call it like I see it. It's just not good functioning. If you want to run legislation through, I get it. But man, we're running some big pieces of legislation through. It's just not being properly vetted. I mean, we passed out what I'll refer to as the voucher bill, the ESA's bill, right?
Right.
It deals with kind
education savings accounts, right?
The savings account bill. Okay, here's how a prime example of why we're not having good transparency and why we're not properly vetting bills. That bill passed out of committee, rushed it to the floor. They passed it out of floor session, right? It passed. They realized after the fact that there were some real money concerns, major money concerns on the cost of that legislation. So they had to essentially recall it back to the floor and then recall it to a committee, right? Completely backtracked on the legislative process because they just rushed it out as fast as they could. That's a prime example. So had it gone through multiple committees, that would have been caught earlier in the process. So you're literally passing a bill on the House floor and then the next day going, oops, I think we screwed up. We got to bring this back again. It's embarrassing. I mean, it goes to show you that we have a process for a reason. The process should be followed because through the years we realized that's the best way for good government.
Yeah, no kidding. Shawn, the user fee proposal that did pass, I believe, 14-12 in committee.
Yeah.
That's very concerning to me. I supported the user fee here in Wheeling. I did. I believe it's long overdue for our police department, our fire department to have new headquarters. I also like that $1 per week of each person's, whatever user fee is going toward infrastructure, and already some very big projects have been completed.
Yep.
But for some reason, Republicans in Charleston right now think it's good to rip that funding mechanism away from municipalities in our state. Who could possibly have thought that's a good idea?
When that bill originally came through, Steve, they carved out just public employees, which I thought was a bad idea. Just doing that.
Sure.
Just because they're public employees doesn't mean they're not reaping the benefits of our fire and police and emergency services.
That's right.
And then, we kind of called them out on that in committee. And the following week we met again. They used an amendment to change it from not just public but all. So basically eliminating the user fee in its totality.
So kind of Shawn, kind of a neener move.
I mean, I don't understand the end game there because we had testimony that this goes directly, like you said, Steve, this goes directly in Wheeling to the police,
yeah,
to infrastructure, vital services we need. If there's an emergency at the Capitol, guess what? The police are going to show up and the first responders and firemen are going to show up. All these individuals are going to show up that right now in Charleston and Wheeling and other cities are paid for and funded by the user fee. It's a huge part of it.
Yeah, we're going to have to lay off police officers because of you. Come on.
It's defunding the police. Democrats get accused of that. Republicans are actually running legislation to do just that, defund the police. So when we had the testimony, I thought for sure, man, this goes back to my point about the committees. Even this bill, we might be able to kill it in committee. And there was a two vote margin, which is unheard of down here these days. So now it's in finance committee. But, at the end of the day, Steve, when you talk about the majority party in charge, I thought true conservatism was to allow local communities to have their say, right? They know more about their local community than somebody who's sitting in Charleston likely does, right? So why are we trying to now centralize power back in Charleston? And that's what's happening with this piece of legislation and other pieces of legislation. You're kind of going back on your word. Conservatism is about smaller government.
Right.
This is not smaller government. And it goes against the principles I thought they were governed by. And it's bad when I'm speaking up and yelling about it and going, hey, wait a minute here. You guys are doing the exact opposite of what you said you were going to do to get elected. And, I think a lot of West Virginians agree that smaller government is an answer in many areas. And I agree with that. And user fee is one example. If a mayor of Wheeling or Huntington or Morgantown, whatever city you want to pick out, if they believe it's good and they want to do it and they've been elected, well, guess what? The voters can hold them accountable later, right?
That's right.
They can vote them out. And that's the process. That's how it should be. The voters have the final say. Good luck doing that if Charleston's controlling everything. Where's the checks and balances? There's no checks and balances on the entire legislature. You could get mad over your representative, your delegate, your senator, but if you're voting these things out in totality as a legislature, the voters really don't have a say. They do on the local level, and that's why user fee, whether people like it or not, they at least have a say at the end of the day whether they want it to continue forward by deciding whether to re-elect somebody who wants to propose it.
Right. Delegate Shawn Fluharty on the program, ladies and gentlemen. This year's word is unitization. Unitization is a new word for forced polling, infringing on private property rights of West Virginians. But this year, it's unitization.
That's what we do, Steve. When things don't poll well under one term, they change the name. They did the same thing with right to work. After right to work didn't poll so well, they changed the name to workplace freedom, and they passed it out. So here, it's coming back. I think we're going to see it this week. And from what I'm being told, and this is the issue with things not being properly vetted, the original reporting of the bill, this might be the worst draft we've seen. The absolute, when people are looking at it who certainly know more about the subject matter than we do, that work in the industry, look at it and go, wait a minute, this is really bad. This is really bad for property owners. It's not just forced pooling either, Steve. They have a bill coming out here to the House floor this week that lowers the interest rate that landowners would receive through eminent domain. So when the government comes to take your property, they're going to put a new road in, whatever it may be. West Virginia has said, okay, you get a 10% interest rate while it's being litigated. They want to lower it to 4.75. So they want the government to be able to come and steal your property at a discount.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that something that's been sacred in our state, Steve? That's like the one thing both parties should agree on, property rights. A state like ours and the history that we have.
You would
and
hope.
I can tell you the Northern Panhandle, there's at least bipartisanship agreement, I believe. And if anybody should look at what part of the state should have the most say in this, it's us.
Yeah.
Northern Panhandle. We're dealing with it on a daily basis.
Well, and here, Shawn, you just struck the nerve. It's kind of like, okay, right now, from what I counted over the weekend when I was researching, 19 to 21 counties in West Virginia. In West Virginia, ladies and gentlemen, just to remind you, 55 counties. So like 20, let's just say 21 counties have gas and oil activity within the borders. Well, that leaves a lot of other counties, 34 other counties, to make this decision with a majority representation and leave us all out when we are the most affected. That's what bothers me the most about the word unitization.
You've hit it on the head, Steve. And that's the main issue, is that you're going to have, and I have colleagues tell me straight up, well, that's not even an issue in my area.
Right.
Sure.
Yep, they get a cut, Shawn. They get a cut because that pie was split in 55 pieces. So they're like, oh, wait a minute. If unitization will give us how much more? How much more, lobbyist? Whoa. And I can take that back to my district and tell them I brought back this much more.
Yeah. And
that's the game.
There aren't as many lobbyists down here this session as you can imagine, Steve, but there are quite a few in the oil and gas industry on that very issue, and they're working it hard. And they see, the sharks are circling down here.
Yep.
And it's just a matter of time at this point. And it worries me because we've had this fight, Steve. It's probably one of the first fights we've had, and you and I have worked together on this from the first time I was elected. The very first session, we killed it on a tie vote. On a tie vote at around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, the last night of session, we killed it. I gave a fiery floor speech. Pat McGean up there in Hancock County, Republican, gave a fiery floor speech. Went back and forth with Delegate Isaac Spinagle on the issue, and it was one of the, a moment that I'll forever remember in the legislature where good prevailed. There was a bipartisan agreement that, wait a minute, we're not going to infringe on the property rights of West Virginians. We're not going to have it not on our watch. And here we are, a few years later, still fighting that fight. And now it feels much different because it feels like with so many new people, Steve, and these bills going through without proper vetting, that it's just going to fly right through in the House. And hopefully that's not the case, but I worry about it.
Now, Shawn, let's see. Okay, so it's $1 more for a pack of cigarettes. Oh, here's the one that I think is just going to destroy West Virginia business in the Northern Panhandle. Currently, ladies and gentlemen, the current bill tax, based on kegs, we've all heard the word keg. There's a half keg, a whole keg, a quarter keg. Okay, so this is on a keg per barrel. Currently, ladies and gentlemen, when a local establishment, be it a restaurant, bar, tavern, call it what you will, right now, when they're buying a keg for that draft, and keep in mind craft beers, because that craft beer represents the most kegs sold in West Virginia right now, per barrel, per keg, an establishment is paying $5.50 per barrel. Governor Justice, ladies and gentlemen, thinks it's a good idea to increase that per barrel tax to $29.25. Shawn, that's insane.
Get ready to start paying New York City beer prices in West Virginia.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of it. I don't think the numbers that have been proposed, I really don't think the governor has a full understanding of the impact it will have, especially at the end of the day, the Eastern Panhandle and Northern Panhandle.
Right.
I mean, if you do that in Charleston, I can tell you, as I'm here in Charleston right now, it's a bit of an island, Steve. Not a whole lot around us. I can't just hop in the car and in 10 minutes be somewhere else with different price structures. But you can in Wheeling. You can in the Eastern Panhandle. And that's going to directly impact, like you said at the beginning, small businesses. I mean, when I posted these numbers on social media the other day, I wanted to kind of get an initial reaction from people. I haven't seen anything too positive.
No.
And believe me, my email inbox is blowing up from both the Northern Panhandle and throughout the state from business owners that are like, wait a minute, we're trying to recover from COVID. We took this shot on the chin, and many of us won't be back. Many of us won't open our doors again. Those who have survived, that are struggling, now you're going to hit us again, just a double blow. And all of this is kind of coming to them without, it's not like they're asking for it, nor is anybody else, for that matter. Who, and under the guise that, well, we're going to bring people to West Virginia. Steve, I've met with so many young people throughout the years.
Yeah.
We've pushed things like the Stay in the State Act. You and I have talked about on the radio probably 50 times. You know, pieces of legislation that are directly involved with getting young people here and retaining who we have. And when you talk to young people, they want things like that, right? They want to participate in our economy earlier because they're not doing it now. When they graduate school, they're saddled with student loans, and they're not buying vehicles and homes and kind of driving our economy. They're not really participating. They're just trying to pay off their loans.
Right.
If we're gonna talk about where do we need to focus our attention to get people here and to keep what we have, that's what we do. I haven't had a single young person say, you know what? Why don't you just get rid of the state income tax and phase it out over some time? They've barely been paying it. That's not an incentive. And then they'll say, well, we want to be like Florida. Well, Florida competes with water. They're a peninsula. We're a panhandle state. So I don't get it, Steve. And I think now with people like you and others up north that are kind of seeing the numbers come in, you just scratch your head and go, where did you come up with this? And here's, at the end of the day, the caveat that I will say is the only way these numbers are going to start working, Steve. And the governor, if you read between the lines, is starting to go back and forth a little bit. And that's with the fact that I think he realizes he can't get to the finish line without adult use cannabis being part of this plan. Because it's a big difference when you're talking about this huge plan and you can cut those numbers in half right away just by having adult use cannabis. And that might be kind of something that comes out of this at the 11th hour. If his goal is to get to the finish line, I don't see how he can do it without having that as part of the proposal.
Right. Shawn, I truly believe one other point that his proposal, revealing the personal income tax proposal, it really shows that he's never struggled in his life. He's never needed anything. He's it's always been a want. I want this and I want that because if I want it, I'm going to get it. He's never financially struggled in his entire life. And it's so revealed if you get into the details of the bill that he entered 2 days ago. It's pretty ridiculous.
It's an excellent point, Steve. I mean, let's call a spade. And Governor Justice, he inherited a coal mine back when that was a very lucrative deal. He doesn't really see through the same lens of you and I and many others in Northern Panhandle, and especially, he has a business that he's had for many years and has been successful. The Greenbrier is obviously successful, and he's not trying to pinching the pennies that many other business owners are throughout the state. And I don't think he's paying attention to the details and just what he's doing to business owners when he says, you know what, here's what you're currently dealing with every year that you can expect, right? When they're crunching their numbers and they're doing their taxes and they're figuring out their budgets and how much they're going to charge for, if it's a brewery or any other bar and establishment, how much they're going to charge their customers for everything.
Right.
And now the governor comes to him and says, okay, I'm going to artificially manipulate the money you're working with, right? I'm going to throw out these new numbers, whether it's a new beer tax or anything else. The cost of doing business for you is going to grow exponentially, and you had nothing to do with it. Not only did you have nothing to do with it, you have no say in it. Here, I'm going to mark you up 4 times on this side, 5 times on this side. And oh, by the way, I'm going to increase the sales tax as well. I mean, it blows my mind. This is really the driving force of what we have, our small businesses, and they're struggling due to the COVID crisis. So they had nothing to do with that. And now they had nothing to do with the fact that their own governor is saying, I'm going to raise prices on you exponentially, and I'm going to raise prices on the customers coming through the door. I mean, at the end of the day, that's really what's going to happen here. So the businesses are going to say, okay, we have to increase X, Y, and Z to keep an earnings coming in to our business. And on top of that, we're going to have an extra tax increase that they have no power over through the sales tax. Now, what does that do to the Northern Panhandle? I mean, we're going to have the highest sales tax in the country, in West Virginia, the highest sales tax in the country. You'd expect that out of California, or you'd expect out of some, elaborate area where people are coming and going no matter what. If you're Hawaii and you're competing with an ocean, I mean, I don't get it. And at the end of the day, who wants it, Steve? Have you talked to anybody who actually wants it?
Not a soul in my. I'm not one of those individuals lucky enough to get a tax return. So what I've said is I'll pay my X amount of dollars, $1,000 a year. Just leave everything else alone for everybody, because this isn't just going to hurt the business owners. That extra percent on a sales tax is going to really damage families living in poverty. And okay, maybe Big Jim has been in the Greenbrier too long, but it just doesn't seem as if he knows the realities of West Virginia, Shawn. It really doesn't. And I don't, honestly, I don't know how to make that happen. It's kind of like, I wrote an open letter last Saturday about, Governor Jim Justice and, his lack of realism in his brain. And it really bothers me that, Jim Justice just doesn't get it. He doesn't get that his repeal proposal doesn't help the real West Virginia. And it doesn't help that, all he's doing, Shawn, week after week is, all right, now we're going to lower the age. Now it's 50 and up. Meanwhile, I've got 65-year-old friends, 72-year-old neighbors, and they're like, whoa, so you can get the vaccine before me because you're only 54, you kid. And it's really upsetting a lot of people, Shawn, not just here in Wheeling, not just here in East Wheeling, but throughout this state. He is angering people with his constant search and quest for international headlines to make him look the best guy possible. Meanwhile, so many West Virginians are feeling left behind.
Well, and that's the byproduct of a governor who has been governing solely by press conference for a year now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we've had this clash in the legislature over one of the first pieces of legislation that came out was reining in his powers. And what happened to that, Steve? The legislature folded like a kite.
Yep.
Completely folded. I mean, we had an amendment that I partnered with Pat McGeehan on in Judiciary Committee because through the course of questioning, I asked directly, does this apply to the current state of emergency that we're operating under? And the testimony was, doesn't appear so. No, it probably would not. It would actually take an act by the governor that then we could respond to with this legislation. In other words, the one that's currently going on since March of last year, it wouldn't change it one bit. You can't govern a state by one guy who walks out to the podium, like you said, wants the national press, governs on a whim, says things without kind of running it through people beforehand, and they don't know what he's going to say. And who's caught at the end? The people who actually have to implement his strategy.
Right.
So when they say, all right, it's age 50, it's age 60, and he's saying it on a whim, and you have different parts of the state who are handling it differently and have a different amount of people they have to try to process through, and they're the ones that take all the heat. They're the ones that have to deal with it. And it's not a good way. Again, back to the very beginning of our conversation, not a good way to govern. We govern on facts and evidence and a process, and that process must be thorough, must be followed. And at the end of the day, we have 3 separate branches of government. We have checks and balances, all these things. And one of the first speeches I had this session was, we're just nameplates at the end of the day, Steve. They can slide that nameplate off on the front of my desk, but guess what's still there? The desk is still there. The House of Delegates is still there. Our government is still there. But when you start chipping away at how we do things in the process itself, and you chip away at the fundamentals and the Constitution, that's dangerous. It sets a bad precedent. But you'd think, Steve, that we would realize that, but we don't.
No, we don't.
Everybody's so power hungry and ego tripping, and just people think they're so much more important than they really are at the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Of the day.
Well, hey, at least the governor finally said he'd live at the seat of government, Shawn.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to get.
My friend Isaac Spinagle.
I know. Shawn, it's great talking to you, my man. Thank you for the time this afternoon. I know that I told you sounded a little tired, so, I had to fire you up to get you going, brother.
I'm feeling good again, man. I'm up walking around here,
I do try.
Put me in the ring. Let's go.
You bet. All right, we'll talk to you very, very soon. Okay, Shawn Fluharty?
All right, Steve. Take care.
All right, thank you, my friend. Very much appreciated. Shawn Fluharty, ladies and gentlemen, Delegate, 3rd District. We'll take a quick break. When we come back to Charleston, Delegate Erikka Storch. Now, she's on the other side of the aisle. We'll get her take on some of the same issues, plus much, much more. I'm Steve Novotney. It is Steve Novotney Lives right here on Lead News. Well, we got the opinion of one side of the aisle that represents District 3 here in Ohio County. Let's go ahead and get the other side of the aisle as well. Ladies and gentlemen, right now with Delegate Erikka Storch. Hi, Erikka. How are you today?
Hey, Steve. I'm well. How are you?
Doing well. You're the only individual that's been on the show each of its first 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
That may make you go back and reevaluate your scheduler.
Yeah, I think I got to fire that guy. He just, what he does? I think he plays favorites.
Or I just have too much free time in my schedule, or I enjoy the opportunity to step out for a quick minute and talk to my friend Steve Novotney.
Well, and it's also important to you and to Shawn Fluharty for the people here to hear from their delegates, especially during a regular session that really, quite frankly, isn't making a whole lot of sense, Erikka.
No, I think I've hit more red buttons this time than ever, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, we've always known that, Yeah, sure, you're a member of the Republican Party, but you don't vote the party line. And sometimes during your first 10 years, that's gotten you in a bit of trouble. But we, the constituents, we do appreciate that. But, I don't know where to start. So we'll just start at the most obvious thing. I talked to, again, Delegate Fluharty on this. What I told Shawn is I believe Governor Justice has truly, he's done in other ways with the silver platter of this and whatever, but I think he's truly displayed that man has only wanted in life and he's never needed in life. It's ridiculous that he thinks this overall tax plan is going to work in the northern panhandle and the growing eastern panhandle. It's just, dare I say, asinine to think that it's a viable project.
Well, it's, you've got to give him credit for taking out his scratch pad and trying to come up with a way to take advantage of the opportunity which was created by COVID, and that would be all the remote working that we saw going on in the country over that time. And, I appreciate his idea that if we could make West Virginia attractive to those that are able to work remotely and, and make that attractive in the form of them not paying personal income taxes, that as you saw the stories of all the masses of people flooding out of New York for Florida or out of California for Texas, that, why would we want them to drive, especially those leaving New York for Florida? Why would we want them to drive through West Virginia on their way? And why wouldn't we want them to stop and stay here? Because we have a lot of wonderful things to offer that, maybe people don't realize. We have 4 distinct seasons every year, and we have a lot of outdoor recreation, and we seem to have a lot of what working people want to experience. But if you're just shifting those taxes to other segments, is it really, it's not really a tax reduction. It's just a shifting of the burden. And with his tax plan, as it currently stands, it would put us with the highest in the nation on sales tax.
Yeah, it would.
And highest on services.
And Erikka, okay, great. We have 4 seasons. Woohoo! We have a lot of great outdoor events. We do. If they're not frozen, we're not Florida, okay? We don't get the snowbirds. We don't have the tourism to support this. Instead, he's throwing it on businesses, and he's throwing it on the poverty-stricken. And
right. He's really throwing it on small businesses.
Yeah. $30 a barrel of tax instead of $5? That is ludicrous.
Yep. And, we can't drop a bill like this on day 20. When do you drop it? Like day 24?
I'll go with that.
So day 24 of the session, you're ready to drop this? This is something we need to study. We weren't able to come to Charleston for interims over the past year, but this is something that needs to be looked at, and really, there needs to be maybe a focus group set up with those representing all the different, portions of our state, where we could bring to their attention the ideas that we're hearing from our constituents. I heard from one local business person in Wheeling, that I don't have the freedom to speak of who I was speaking, so I'll just try to keep it vague. But they said that this potential plan would impact their business to the tune of $4 million in additional payments that they would be required to make. So what would incentivize anybody to want to remain or grow in West Virginia with this type of burden?
Yeah, it's the whole mentality of repeal it and they will come. One, they will not come because of several things you've already said. Number one, the struggles for small businesses. And number two, the highest sales tax rate in the country.
And several of our municipalities also have a municipal tax that would be a further burden.
Yeah.
On our residents.
I mean, we have an extra. The sales tax in the city of Wheeling would be 8%.
I think it'd be 8.9.
Well, let me think. Okay, the city added that.
He wants us to go from 6 to 7.9. So we have the added 1. So.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right, 8.9. Nobody's coming here. People are going to leave. We're going to go. I remember when I was a kid, my dad would be like, sales tax in West Virginia is too high. We're going to Ohio for our gas. And we did. You know what? I buy clothes in Western PA. You know why? No tax.
Well, you might not want to say that too loud because you're technically supposed to report it as a user or a use tax in the state of West Virginia on your tax forms.
Well, go ahead and turn me in. I'd appreciate that. That'd be all right.
I will not turn you in, but I can't speak for all your listeners.
Now, okay, so we've already established the tax plan by the governor is a nonsensical plan, and I had some fun with Shawn about the new term. It's a new term. It's unitization 2021. And my fear, as I communicated to Shawn, and I've talked with you about before, is that we have a minority of county delegates and senators whose districts are impacted by the gas and oil white truck traffic. The majority, when that piece of the pie was put out on the table, it was split into 55 slices. 55. Even though the majority have no idea about water truck convoys, escort trucks, super loads, and, once a fine country property being turned into a hissing, constant hissing property. But here we are. You guys are behind the 8 ball because the majority just wants more income from their piece of pie.
Yeah, I haven't taken a look at that bill, although I need to pull it up and get into that a little deeper.
I'll tell you what it is. You don't even have to open it up. I'll give you 2 words that explains exactly what it is. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Forced polling.
Yep.
You want 3 more rights? Infringing upon property rights. It's bad. I mean, if somebody if somebody wants their land to be untouched by the gas and oil industries, then that's their that's their decision. And
right.
What's the insult? Hey, we're going to take your property, and because you wouldn't play ball, you get no bonus. And we're going to give you 12.5%, the lowest of anybody in the state. So take that. You don't matter. Your property doesn't matter. We're taking it, and you're going to like it. I wonder if the Republican majorities in Charleston realize, and that includes you, Erikka, realize that that's how you're coming off, that that's what you're saying to West Virginia property owners without a doubt.
Well, as you know, my in-laws are all Marshall County property owners, and I run everything by my brother-in-law, who is he's a very bright guy, and he's very concerned about his property rights. And as you may recall, I was a no vote on forced pulling last time this body saw it.
Are you pledging a no vote then?
Well, I haven't even looked at the bill, but there's no way I'm going to give away people's property rights.
No way.
I like Christmas dinner.
Yeah, right. Delegate Erikka Storch on the program for a few more moments. And Erikka, we've talked about this, and it's really bugging me because forced polling, and we've talked about the minority of the counties and the majority of the counties. And we've also talked about panhandle paranoia. where we always think, y'all go down there, you're not heard, nobody cares. I mean, Shawn's the minority whip in the House, and that's cool. I mean, congratulations. But once again, here we are, almost halfway through a session, and the people in the panhandles are feeling, we come up with that S word every once in a while, secession. And I think one of the only roadblocks to separating is we don't have a good name. But once again, here we are. It's like chop us off because we don't matter.
I definitely feel like that for the northern panhandle. But I don't know if I necessarily think that the eastern panhandle shares that sentiment, because I feel like a lot of this is driven by the eastern panhandle. And I'll tell you why. Senate President Craig Bellaire is from the eastern panhandle. And, that is one of our major growth zones in this state, or major growth regions in this state.
Sure, right.
Morgantown, the Mon County area, Mon, maybe a little bit in the northern Marion, and then the eastern panhandle are growth areas. So I feel like they are calling a lot of the shots and driving a lot of the legislation because of the desires and the wants of the eastern panhandle. When I first started serving, I think the northern and eastern panhandle were more similar, but now I think they cut us off to save themselves.
Okay, well, let's go with that thought. And that it only pertains to the northern panhandle. I, as a longtime northern panhandle resident, do not like that silenced feeling. And I think that's how a lot of us are feeling.
And that's where, I don't know. I guess I cannot speak to your feelings, but Shawn and I try very diligently to represent those in our constituent base that reach out to us, those in our constituencies that reach out to us, to explain to our counterparts down here, our colleagues, the thoughts of our residents in Ohio County. And I think we do a pretty good job of that. I haven't really heard from many about legislation except for the bulk emails and stuff that come from like Voter Voice or something like that, which those just clog up your clutter box or your junk mail. They don't really go to a good email account where you can take a look at them because they're just automatically populated. Maybe you sign on something or you click here or something and then.
Right.
But I've talked to several over the past year, especially, and have helped several deal with their workforce issues. And I still continue to help as, 1099s are being received. I've still been making connections for citizens that have concerns about that. And like I said, that's not necessarily to legislation, but outside of the Voter Voice emails, I really haven't. I've talked to a couple people that have called and have wanted to have a conversation, and I'll talk to anybody that wants to call me. And I enjoy the conversations because it gives me the input and the information I need to make good decisions on legislation.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
Like you said, some of them just, you scratch your head, but I think, like I said, a lot of it's coming from the Eastern Panhandle.
All right, now what do you expect the rest of this week? As far as any more bills being introduced, is the flow continuing or are we about done?
No, there's still bills being introduced. And it looks like they're kind of getting caught up in bill drafting. They have been behind a little bit this year because they've had several long-term bill drafters that haven't returned this year due to COVID or concerns over COVID or whatever. So there was a huge backlog with bill drafting. I've still got a couple bills down there I'm hoping to get up this week. I know several of my colleagues are also looking for pieces of legislation they'd like to take a look at as well. So this week's calendar is, we only have
Delegate Storch accidentally hung up the phone, but that's okay. We're out of time anyway, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to Delegate Fluharty, Delegate Storch. Very much appreciated. And of course, during the first hour, thanks to Rick Jones and my dear friend Scott Porter for being on the program as well. Little preview to Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen. Doug Giffen, you heard him on radio before. Doug is the president of the IBEW Local 141. He and I have had several conversations about the need for CTE classes in our high schools, the need for the trades. And you always hear, well, you're always going to need a plumber, you're always going to need this, and you're always going to need that. But where is that heading in today's educational environment? We'll talk to Doug about that. And then Liner Notes with John Banco comes back Wednesdays at 4, a weekly segment. This week, we're going to talk to Chris Dutton. Chris Dutton is the co-founder of Blame My Roots, a country music festival that had a pretty good inaugural year, was getting ready to come back with a big show last summer, but that was canceled because of the pandemic. And now he's got Miranda Lambert coming to Morristown, Ohio. It's supposed to be a big, giant show. We're going to talk to Chris about his decision to move forward with that festival that takes place on that third weekend in July. So that's going to be the Wednesday show. Let's see. And then on Friday, a very special show. You'll see what that's all about. I'll let you know on Wednesday. But Wednesday, 3 and 4, or between 3 and 5. Until then, God bless you, folks. We'll talk again.